Hello and welcome to this episode of Unscripted. I'm joined in this episode by my good friend Dan Loosemore. And just for some context, Dan and I worked together. We were in a startup launch business together. We've known each other for some time. And this business was pre-pandemic and we were doing webinars. Dan, how many were we doing? Like 5 a week or something silly like that, right?
Hundreds and thousands.
Exactly. So we did all of those webinars, and I think all of that learning held you in good stead, Dan, during the pandemic, because we were at the cutting edge of how to make it all systemic and bring it forward. But I wanted to get you onto this Unscripted because you're also doing a lot of very interesting work with data, which is a next step of some of the work that we pioneered when we were working together. And you've used a very sophisticated tool in terms of ThoughtSpot. And I'm interviewing you, so I feel like I need to stop talking, but I'd just like to welcome you here and just tell us a little bit about where you are at the moment. And then if you can go into a little bit about what insights and what changes that sort of more data-centric focus has enabled you to do in your current role.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. You're being far too polite. I took all your insights and then figured out how to apply them to other business models. So yeah, now look, I'm currently CEO at DCD. We're a marketing services business that essentially helps people who are building, planning, supplying or operating digital infrastructure make informed decisions faster. It's a circa 20 million revenue business across 3 business units: live events, marketing services, which is predominantly online, and learning and development, which again is predominantly digital first, blended learning experiences. Data's at the heart of everything we do. It essentially of 3 core trends, which really, to be honest, you'd mentored me through in our previous business together, as you alluded to, and being far too polite on. The first one of those is the buyer trends. You know, your readers, your data set. We're in the age of personalization. They want information that's pertinent to them. They expect that to be delivered multi-channel. So of course, naturally, they expect an agenda to them in person at a physical event, which is tailored to them, but they expect the same thing online. If they want to come to a homepage, they want to see a homepage that's tailored to them. B2B buying has become multi-channel, you know, in reflection of B2C trends. If someone's buying a car, you know, no longer do you walk into a showroom not knowing what the reviews have been or what car you want, right? The B2B buyer journey is now buyer-led, it's not seller-led. And so that therefore necessitates a different type of online and face-to-face experience. 90% of buyers, this is a recent Gartner survey, say that content informs that B2B buyer decision-making. And so we're naturally in a multi-channel world, which is far more buyer-led. In fact, they're probably not coming to a third-party site. DCD or any media event business being a first-party site, they're probably not coming to a third-party site, a vendor site. It's actually pretty late in that process now. So that's the first mega trend. The second trend is, and so that's kind of customer, right? And then when you look at the customer trend, you've got sales and marketing teams that are fundamentally still disjointed, largely running 2013 to 2018 playbooks in terms of we're going to hire a load of SDRs. We're going to build up a relatively cold data funnel for these SDRs. Maybe we pay $100 per lead on that data funnel, you know, across LinkedIn, Facebook, or indeed sites like ourselves. Feed the SDRs with this largely unfiltered, lacking behavioural data, and we're going to expect results. And it worked for a while. That's why the playbook existed. You know, a delegate sales or an SDR type rep phoning up a cold data set was working. Emailing a cold data set was working. It's not anymore. And so you've got metrics between marketing and sales teams, which are fundamentally misaligned. And actually, you know, from your experience, Clarion and NGRT and the media CTO, you've seen this and you're actually an early mover on it. But now the marketing and sales teams themselves are seeing it. It is changing. So this misalignment is more understood now. I think the average CMO lasts about 18 months in position in tech business. So that in itself should raise alarm bells, right? So at DCD, we're fixing for that misalignment, and we're fixing for that misalignment using data using more automated intelligence from the data sets that we have as a first-party provider. And even in the paradigm of seeing ourselves as a first-party provider of data intelligence, that the mindset shifts because, we'll be looking back at this in a couple of years' time thinking, geez, I can't believe that was just a couple of years ago, because the paradigm shift between marketing and sales is hugely shifting. And the age of let's fill leads and let's expect them to convert, it's dead. Funny enough, I was reading the recent metadata report. I don't know if you've seen it. On paid social channels and paid social leads, I think the average cost per lead was a couple of hundred. Not insignificant. That's decent spend on a CPL basis. And the average conversion rate across those paid social channels was 0.03%. Not even 0.3,
crazy, right?
0.03, right? And so you only have to look at the top level data to see that model is fundamentally broken. So what we're trying to fix for now at DCD is really, really simply aligning that sales and marketing funnel through live events, through marketing services and through demand creation.
You've got a problem though, haven't you? Because, and dare I say it, when I was active in the industry and you and I were working together, we did have this problem as well. We encountered as well. So while we started seeing these numbers and taking the right conclusions for these numbers, you still, and you said it earlier on, you still have marketers who are running a very old playbook where they're going, I want a webinar and can you give me 100 leads? The conversation is that simple, right? And you turn around and say, well, I don't want to have the conversation about guaranteeing you 100 leads. The conversation that I want to have with you is about giving you the right 50 people, and I will show you who the right 50 people are by incorporating the behavioral analytics. And we started doing that, right? We started saying, hey, this person has really engaged with your content pre-coming to the webinar. They are hotter than this person. They might not fit within your structured world paradigm where, if they're not Fortune 500, blah, 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 I'm not going to count them as a lead. But hang on a minute, they're going to buy your stuff. So what are you doing because it's a tough ask, right? Because you have to educate almost your buyer. You also have to validate that what you're saying is true and, work with sophisticated stuff like ThoughtSpot to bring that evidence together. So can you just paint a picture of what you had to go through to get there? Because the last time we met, which was a year and a half ago, you were just kind of really starting to push this through.
Yeah, and it's still tough because you're right. There's an element of education there, and there's an element of investment needed. I'm very lucky at the moment that I've got new investors who are sort of buying into this vision and enabling a structure that's needed. So I think the first thing's the structure of your own internal teams. A salesperson is probably not the person who's going to be, day to day on these projects because it requires time. You're asking clients to look at pipeline influence and won revenues rather than just volumes. And so you need to de-risk that volume, of course you do, and educate around it and come to an agreement, which actually at DCD we're putting into contract level. So complete transparency from the outset on that. But then also caring about the actual outcome, which obviously in most cases is pipeline and won revenues. So first of all, you need a structure to enable that longer term partnership. So we've leaned heavily on client success teams. We've got everything. So we've currently got 264 clients, running active campaigns, multi-channel and face-to-face. And each one of those 264 has a client success manager because salespeople want to sell. And actually we're paying them to sell. So let them focus on their core competencies. We're going to put client success in to actually manage these campaigns and look at everything you spoke about. Like what's the ABM layer that needs to be applied here? What's the behavioral scoring that actually we need to talk to your sales team around? How can we adopt things like an API, data transfer? So it's tech enabled, but actually it's about humans too. And it goes from you're a third party giving us 100 data points to you're an extension of our sales and marketing team. So that paradigm shift is important. And over the past, I've been at DCD 5 years now, nearly. In fact, almost exactly as I'm talking to you. And that paradigm's just taken almost those 5 years, to be honest. But it's been key to retention. We've got almost over 100% revenue retention here now.
It makes it very hard for people to unplug from you organizationally, right? Because you are, it's no longer a transactive relationship.
No.
It's no longer, oh, you want to do this. I've got some real estate that you can pitch your stand onto and let's see what happens, right? To going, no, you want to do this. Let me really understand what it is you're trying to do. And what it sounds to me is you're also having to completely re-educate your entire team about how they're engaging with the client to move away from this transactive to a data-driven relationship. Right, almost
completely. And look, we're still iterating that. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's so our biggest client right now is converting, to borrow from your own language, a commercially valuable outcome on our website. Check out the framework underneath this podcast. A commercially valuable outcome on our website, right?
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you for plugging my framework. At
about 16% though, right? Which still strikes me as quite inefficient. It's better than some of our competitors. It's keeping us, a preferred supplier at the moment, but there's still a huge amount of work to be done there. But at least we've got a structure wherein actually our internal teams are focused on the same outcome, which is kind of half the battle. And I think the other part of that, the flip side of the coin, if you like, to the seeming paradox, it's also about transparency. And again, that's required investment.
And that's the biggest thing, isn't it? That is the biggest thing. The analogy I always use, you probably still remember the days when you used to ship something and then you used to wonder for a week whether the thing has actually been shipped. Where is it? When is it going to arrive? Nowadays, you ship something, you know exactly where it is. You know the person's marital status who's going to deliver it to you, whether they have kids or not. You almost have too much information, right? But it's about inverting the process and showing the working, as my maths teacher always said, so that you can create a partnership. And the world that you and I grew up in events, we never showed the working. It's almost like, don't tell anybody how many pre-reg we've got because it'll scare them, because we know how it works, but they don't, right? And what you've done is, well, let's educate them into knowing how it works so that they know that at this point in time, it ain't going to be that big, but you're working things together.
Yeah, well, that's still right? There, though. I mean, and yeah, look, when I started in 2009, right? So we were still sending delegate brochures and getting bookings back on the fax back to us on the back of the delegate brochure. It's quite remarkable, really, in a relatively short space of time. Anyway, I digress slightly. No, but that level of transparency, people expect in B2B now because they're so used to it in the B2C example you gave. And so, you have to show them how many people have read the editorial in real time. They expect that, and you have to make that defensible because it's working towards a bigger outcome. And there's still a great fear around that. So it's only a few hundred people who've read that article. It's like, well, yeah, but if that few hundred people have a combined budget of 2 billion, it's quite important, isn't it? And so, by layering that intelligence behind the sort of single number, you can justify that position. And by not giving them any transparency at all, it breeds suspicion. And actually, if you were to, do the slightly old school thing, at the risk of being a bit Machiavellian about it, if you were to do that, I'll tell you what we'll do. We won't show them now. We'll give them a PowerPoint deck in a few months' time and we'll double the number. It breeds suspicion and rightly so, because it doesn't seem authentic. So I think that sort of authenticity and just look, here's the data studio, it's plugging through in real time, here's where it's plugging from. And being able to share that actually breeds that sort of partnership type mentality that you're describing. It's been absolutely key for us. And of course, not all partners will need that level of intelligence. Of course, there's different layers, but we've kind of been razor focused, to be honest, on right, the top 200 clients, we're going to take them on this journey with us. And beyond that, we've maybe got a couple of thousand vendors beyond that who are quite BD-led still. That's fine. They can book their points of presence at the event. They can come and attend and they can collect their business cards and be happy. That's okay. So, it's not the model for everyone. I think you have to have high CapEx values and you have to have a certain amount of sophistication in your own tech stack to be able to work with us in that way. But it's important. I just fundamentally believe that that's the direction of travel for B2B. So that's the vision that we've been working to here.
Well, I think, you're preaching to the converted, right? Because I have been I don't know how long I've been talking about this, and we've gone through phases where I was doubting myself, going, am I going mad? But the more I'm talking to the market and talking to the right people in the market, because you're right, we still have people running the old playbook, and they are still, I would say, majorities. I find, though, that there is the biggest disconnect is also in skills and skills around data literacy. Because if you are going to change the paradigm and you're going to say, look, we're going to approach it like this, you need the data literacy in order to execute on that. You need to be able to go, everything that's coming from this API data stream is not equal. Some of it has behavioral data, therefore we can triage that in a different way, and so on. How are you dealing with the data literacy challenge? Because I think it is probably the single biggest challenge in our sector. Not our clients necessarily, although they might have it too, but in our sector, in the event sector, we're not evidence-based.
Internally, you mean, within our own business?
Yeah. The industry in general. Maybe you guys have nailed it, but in the industry, right?
Yeah. Look, I think we're far from nailing it. Actually, part of the challenge in our previous venture that we worked on together was we were taking your paradigm, your methodology, that what we've been talking about, and we were trying to bootstrap it into an event financing model. That was very difficult. That was very difficult. I was very lucky at DCD, and this maybe isn't that helpful because there's no silver bullet. But I was very lucky at DCD because we had a data team. Well, what a luxury. So I walked into a business that was already sort of 50, 60 people strong. We had a team of 3 or 4 data people, analysts and engineers. Well, that's a huge advantage. And it's just, it doesn't sound very large, but in media and event terms, it's probably disproportionately large. And it was maybe more by mistake than design at the time. They were feeding leads to sponsors from events, ostensibly. It was 98% event revenue at this time. But nonetheless, because of the lead gen focus, there was a legacy data team that I was able to inherit, and it's been key, absolutely key. And we've added engineers to it. So, we had a level of intelligence around the importance of data that's perhaps unusual. I think almost more difficult is educating, because anyone can go and hire a couple of data analysts, engineers. It's not that cost prohibitive. I think almost the more difficult bit is evangelizing internally the importance of that. They're not there just to clean Salesforce. They're not there just to ship leads to your sponsors. What we're here to do is create more valuable outcome. And so that I think's, ostensibly the bigger challenge here. It's like, well, actually, what's the value of this data team? They're not here to clean the phone number. Someone else phone this, just did. Apologies. They're not there to clean the data records. And so that piece of value creation was, I think, the larger jump. So actually, what does this mean? It means to come back to the problem statement at the top of the podcast, it means that actually we're better supporting the sales and marketing teams to win deals, because when we're shipping a lead, it's coming with a level of behavioral intelligence behind it. When we're reporting on a piece of editorial, we're able to tell the client who's most engaged in this, what company are they from, well, what else has that company read, are they in market or are they not in market, And I'm probably not doing anything that other platforms aren't doing, by the way. Like TechTarget's been very successful in trying to drive that sort of intent data. Debatable, I know, but they've been very successful in doing it. Bombora at a sort of composite company level, who we're still working with, by the way. So we're plugging into these wider sources. But the point is, in real time, the client's then got a look of, all of a sudden, let's just go back to that editorial example. It's not really about, it's got 200 eyeballs. Is that good or is that not good? I've not got a huge frame of reference because it's very industry dependent. But we're able to say, well, actually, look, it's not really about that. We're going to show you the thought leadership minutes. We're going to show you what those minutes mean in terms of the companies who are most engaged in it. What else have they read? What type of content should we be creating next time? Who are the most engaged individuals with this piece, and what else can we provide them? It's about that buyer journey and understanding those personas. And so I was lucky in that I inherited some skill sets. I inherited some skill sets internally that were helpful. But the bigger piece is really working with your sales teams and your customer success teams to explain the value of this to the client. And we have had to be pretty evangelistic about that over the last 4 years. I mean, my internal team here are probably sick to death of me talking about it, but I think that's the point, isn't it? I suppose you almost have to be that passionate about it.
Welcome to my world. Everybody I know is sick to death of hearing me talk about it, and I've been at it for close to 12 years. But what you just said there, I want to pick up on is those buyer personas. However, what you're doing is you're making those buyer personas dynamic, because in the B2B world, my buyer persona changes all the time. If I'm a CMO, I'm not always looking for a new marketing automation system. I've got a whole bunch of other challenges, and how you bring those signals in to show people that, and it's almost an education exercise, that the structured data about a person, what their job role is, what their job function is probably, I would say, is tertiary almost. There are two variables that are important. One is whether this company can afford your solution, and are they looking at it? Are they engaging with it? Are they engaging with that narrative? Everything else, because you've got buyer teams now. I mean, you and I were very fortunate. We grew up in startup world where you and I probably did make the decisions, right? But that's not normal.
No, and again, it comes back into that buyer journey that we started with of our customer, like these decision-making panels, 12, 15 plus, if you've got any sort of company size. And it becomes quite difficult at that point to raise your head above the parapet, doesn't it? So if they're talking about, I don't know, if they've got 10 different CRM systems, because that's a piece of tech we all understand in this industry, it takes a pretty brave person, even within that team, to say, oh, we should move. What, you're going to move away from the legacy one that they've been using for 5 years? That's a brave buyer. And so actually the job title can be pretty varied in that. So there's sort of old models of ideal customer profiles. And, when I first started doing buyer personas, and you have these marketing consultants come in, and there's some very good ones, by the way. So I don't mean this as a dig. But they say, oh, you need to humanize. What's this guy's name? Oh, the guy's name's Jeff, and he's probably walking a dog. It's like completely unusable in your team's heads, right? It's like, why are we doing this? It sort of all becomes very abstract, and you file them away and probably never use them in your segmentations. Yeah, what we're talking about is what are the buyer signals? What's the behavioral data that infers a level of activity or intent within that buying group? And so we've started, within all of and this comes back to that tech sprawl piece, because it's not about the technology. You could be using any system or any piece of text. How are you scoring that activity, and how are you refining that? And we still haven't got that right. Ostensibly it sounds logical. You get a point if you visit a specific content channel tag on the website in a week. You get 5 points if you tune into a discussion like what we're having right now, right? If you attend a roundtable or you attend an event, you get 10 points. So ostensibly it's scored sort of logically. That's still in refinement. But the point is it's scored based upon activity from the human, which feeds up into a composite score, not some sort of, ICP or persona that's probably half a decade old and not reflective of anything that's actually going on your website.
Well, that's the big thing, which is why I came up with the framework, right? Because it allows you to get to a series of numbers that are intelligible to people. And, I love the fact that you're building out these composite scores. Not many people are, we're working with clients where we're putting in a real sort of balanced scorecard methodology, very similar to you, depending on what you interact with. And then we give different values based on other behavior. But we're slowly in danger of running out of time. I want to try and keep these podcasts, certainly the initial ones, to about half an hour. I've got one question for you. And I'm patting myself on the back because you're saying so much what I agree with, and I've let you talk, and I've resisted the urge of talking about myself and all that sort of stuff like a good host. But if you were to talk to someone who is kind of playing with this idea in their head of doing this differently, I need to really start putting data first. I need to start looking at my data team. You're right, not as people who clean my Salesforce data, but as people who add value consistently, persistently. What are some of the tips you would give to people listening about how you start the journey, what you want to be aware of? And by the way, you've got 5 minutes to do this, right? So Let's go.
A couple of points, and again, we're slightly biasing it because you mentored me in a lot of this thinking. But first of all, think about the outcome that you're actually optimizing for. Yeah, I'll give you an example of what not to do, which kind of baffled me at the time. We had a pandemic, and so nobody could run their physical events, and so the immediate response was to virtualize events, but not create events for the vehicle that we're now using, but to actually try and literally digitize an exhibition area. And they were coming up with virtual exhibition stands. I never understood that. You're trying to digitize something that's already imperfect in a physical world. Very useful, by the way. Love a trade show. Don't get me wrong, but you're trying to digitize that. You should be thinking about the outcome. What's the outcome? And then what's the best digital vehicle for that outcome? Because in that case, it almost certainly wasn't a pretend exhibition stand that's been really badly 2D visualized. And some of those companies had crazy valuations. And again, not a dig at the company, but it was completely backwards. Think I couldn't understand it at the time. Don't understand it now. So I think there's two things. The first thing is think about the outcome and then the best vehicle to drive that. It doesn't need to be expensive, by the way, but you need to have a very clear goal in mind for what you're actually trying to help the client with. And I think
we did some amazing stuff with a bunch of free tech. Right?
Yeah, because we were looking at it as a high intent MQL or CVO, as you've got. That was the only thinking. So it doesn't have to be expensive tech, 3D. It doesn't have to be that. In fact, we actually at the time doubled down on content creation, not just demand capture. If we create the demand, the capture will come when we're getting those buyer signals. Again, it requires more trust from the customer and a longer campaign. But we're still seeing, in a year where for most media and events businesses, I think it's safe to say there's been some cannibalization on digital revenues and a return to live, almost inevitable after the last couple of years we've had. We're seeing no slowdown in our content creation pieces because they're serving value, they're serving an outcome. People aren't very good at creating content. It's hard, it's expensive. They haven't necessarily got the internal expertise on the quote unquote virtual events. I don't even know what that means really, but that's where you see a lot of the trouble. Our content creation arm's never been stronger because it's really based around an outcome. And I think the other point I've ran over you a lot of time, but I think the other important point is Hamburgers as a consultant came in and said to me, how do you get as close to a standardized product as possible? Because bespoke work will kill your margin and it becomes really hard to deliver, particularly when you're talking about standardization of behavioral data and visualizations into real-time dashboards. It's got to be standardized. And so you have to have a comfort level there in what you're delivering to create as many hamburger type products as possible. It doesn't mean that you can't, put ABM layers on it and you can't do creative things with the content itself, but you have to standardize the process, the data sets, the product to enable that scalability. And so much digital work, I still see, I've sat in on one or two recent sort of board discussions at various media companies, which I've been lucky enough to do. And so much of anything that's not a physical face show, so much of it's still bespoke. That's really almost an anathema to doing it sustainably. So I think that would be the other big lesson, really. Hamburgers.
Productize. You and I did that, right? Productize the framework, productize the systems, standardize your language, standardize your systemics, all of that. That, Dan, is an amazing full stop. I think we're going to finish on that. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on this unscripted podcast. I'll let you know how these things go, but up until now, I've really enjoyed the discussions. Whether anybody listens and enjoys them, hey ho, we'll figure it out.
Thanks very much for having me.